G'day legends, I hope that you're doing well. Today we're going to talk about the F-16 issue, the fighter jet issue in Ukraine. And will these come across, will they not? But before we get into, I guess, the depths of that, I want to give a shout out to a good mate of mine, Mark Doreen, who runs Point Assist. Mark had got into Australia's elite SAS or SASR here in Australia in 1997 and had a massive career, Timor, Afghanistan, some of the first boots in Afghanistan. And he does a lot of stuff online, his website, and his talk about Afghanistan as someone who's experienced from the beginning, middle, end of the war, everything in that is fantastic. So I'll link that below. He has YouTube as well and whatever. So I just want to give a shout out to him. He's a really close friend of mine and produces some amazing stuff that I don't think gets the eyes on it that it really should. So yeah, jump across. I'll put the links below and have a squiz at that. And as well in the news was that there's been an Iranian drone facility struck with suicide drones, loitering munitions, something along that. Now, Israel isn't taking credit for this, but everyone knows that it was Israel that had hit it. This happened a couple of nights ago, and there's been a lot of footage come out of big fireballs and explosions and this and that. Although satellite images have come out today, mainly actually shared by Ukrainian media, that have shown little to not much damage at these facilities. And it is important to realise from the photographs we've seen of these Iranian drone facilities that they are underground. Now, of course, we don't know the depth of that. No idea. Some people might. It would take a large, sort of bunker-busting munition to do this. But Israeli military hardware is, incredibly high-end. Israel is a massive market for receiving and producing military hardware. So, although a satellite image might not show something flattened, maybe it hit something, surgery precision on something incredibly important that may not actually show that much damage on the ground. We don't know the full extent of that. And I should say it's only alleged that Israel carried out this strike against Iran. And as well, we've seen a lot of photos today shared over Twitter and whatever of Iranian IL-76 planes. These are like a transporter. It's like the Soviet equivalent of like sort of a C-130, C-17 thing landing in Moscow. Now, what are they bringing? We don't know. They could be bringing more Shahed suicide drones that Russia is using against Ukraine. Could be bringing a whole range of stuff. And people are like panicking about this. But as I'll show on these flight logs, this isn't a rare thing. These planes are coming to and from Tehran and Moscow, Iran and Russia all the time. And this is how these things are getting in and out of the country. Now, along with these Western tanks, the Leopard 2s and the Abrams, and I don't really like mentioning the Abrams because if they're a year away, let's worry about that, procurement and delivery in Ukraine when they come, when we see them come, because a year is a long time, a lot can happen in that. So really, I like to focus on the Leopard 2 delivery. And like I've said previously, if this war were to end tomorrow, what tanks realistically would Ukraine be looking at getting? Most likely Leopard 2s. And, there's been many countries say that, yep, we'll give some degree of Leopard 2, and, they're well over 100 now that will be delivered in the coming months. And as of Western tanks, there's something like 300. There's an amount unaccounted for in that, but potentially hundreds of tanks. And this is incredibly important and will have influence on how the war changes. Will it shift the way this war is going? Probably not. No single item will shift anything. And this is because of combined arms. And I know people hear me crap on about this all the time, but combined arms is everything in a modern war. Well, it has been in all war, but especially with the modern three-dimensional space, as far as three-dimensional, you've got things under the water as submarines, you've got things in the sky, not only planes, but now drones and surveillance. You've got soldiers, infantry guys in the front line, you've got tanks, helicopters, all of this. It's a three-dimensional space. And combined arms, those working together, really gives what your military actual power is. Combined arms capability are the critical success in battle, because no single arm can actually have decisive action against an adaptive enemy. So you send in your tanks, well, they'll send in drones and anti-tank weapons. You send in infantry, well, they'll send in tanks. So you need all of these, because as the enemy adapt to what you're sending, well, combined arms can overwhelm it, but if you're just sending in one, it just won't work. And this is why we did see a major failure of the Russian invasion in the beginning, was lack of combined arms and lack of logistics to support those combined arms. I would say, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, if Russia, with its amount of equipment and amount of bodies, had the combined arms, training and ability of a Western military, that it would have been a very different situation in the beginning of that war. But it comes down to those are the reasons we saw convoys in the middle of nowhere, stuck, not being able to move, no fuel, and then getting whacked by other weapons, Ukrainian weapons, because, well, they might have had tanks there, but did they have air cover? Did they have air superiority? And why I bring this up is a lot of these tanks, they will be, formidable force, but without that combined arms, the actual effectiveness of these tanks is greatly reduced. And Ukraine knows this. Everyone knows this. This is why it is so important. Well, this is why Ukraine's pushing so hard on getting Western fighter jets. And everyone likes to bring up the F-16. We know there's plenty of different, Eurofighter, Typhoon, all these different planes. We know there's so many, but they're saying the most cost-effective and the most efficient and the most widely used, not only in the US, but through Europe as well, the F-16 was probably the best option for Ukraine. And I'm not a fighter pilot, so I can only believe what I say. But from the outside looking in, it probably is the best option. But this brings a whole nother batch of issues. And you know what? It comes down to money, logistics, and maintenance. Fighter jets, tanks. Tanks are one thing. Fighter jets are a complete other kettle of fish. It is crazy. So Ukraine currently operate Soviet-era fighter jets. Mainly the MiG-29, which have become a point of controversy because in March, Poland also operates MiG-29s and basically said, we want to transfer ours to Ukraine in the receival of more American weapons. And America actually said no to that decision of that transfer from Poland to Kyiv. And it became a bit controversial. And Poland didn't end up transferring the full planes, but they transferred, well, we know several got in, but put as spare parts. And apparently there was some back and forward of, well, you can't transfer that. And they're like, well, the fuselage and wings are spare parts. So we don't know exactly what came across. But, these planes like this are absolutely necessary for that combined arms force. But as everything, an F-16 won't be a silver bullet. Turkey operate F-16s, and there's a big point of contention there as well. But Turkey operate F-16s and also operate Russia's S-400 anti-air radar missile system. And Turkey have been in a lot of trouble in 2019, 2020 for actually using its S-400 system to track its own F-16s to see how that system would work. Now, missiles weren't launched, of course, because they're Turkey jets against Turkish missile systems. But we know fairly well that it can track those. And the S-400, and they was built to track America's high-end sort of F-35 style jets. We do know that that is a good anti-air system. And that those jets will still be very susceptible to a system like that. And of course, the contention in Turkey is Turkey went for 100 F-35, America's most modern fighter jet, and America basically said no, although it's transferred them to Greece and across the Aegean Sea. This has become like a big thing within NATO, and now Turkey is actually looking at maybe other countries to supply its fighter jets, and it's looking at Russia. And Turkey, in some ways, Erdogan there, is somewhat playing both sides of the field. Turkey is supplying a lot of stuff to Ukraine, especially their private industry, but Turkey use a lot of Russian equipment. And if they were to go down the path of, Russian-made fighter jets, well, they're going to have to make spare parts and training and all of this. The F-16. And the F-16 is made by Lockheed Martin, biggest defence company in the world. Lockheed love a war. These defence companies love a war. They make a lot of money. Lockheed has said that they can easily, and some say they have already spun up production of F-16s and can create more of them to replace ones that may be sent from the US or other countries into Ukraine. The Dutch have said that they are open to the idea of giving F-16s. But fighter jets require a lot of maintenance. Now, an F-16 requires a lot less maintenance and a lot less cost than something like an F-22 and F-35, but it's still a lot. An F-16 is somewhere in the vicinity of 17 hours of maintenance time for every 1 hour of flight time, and in the vicinity of $29,000 per hour of flight time. Fighter jets are a high-end, expensive, and maintenance-heavy machine because, well, look at them. They go bloody over Mark 1 upside down in the air doing all sorts of shit. And you have also tens of people per jet. And all these people need to be specifically trained on that airframe. And there is a weird sort of back and forward of no one knows where the truth lies about are Ukrainian pilots training on US-made jets. So Ukrainian Colonel Inyat, the spokesman of the Air Force, has said, quote, "Our military pilots went to the United States, funds were allocated for the training of our pilots." And recently, the Pentagon spokesman, United States Air Force Brigadier General Ryder, when asked about these claims by Warzone, said that he was unaware of any Ukrainian pilots training in the US. Now, where does the truth lie? We don't know. It may be halfway. Maybe some pilots came out to train on simulators in the US or somewhere around the world. We're not really sure. If you're interested in the Ukrainian fighter pilots, I did an interview maybe 10, 11 videos ago, but you have to scroll down. And I actually do a full interview with a Ukrainian MiG pilot by the name online as Yellowtail 29, sorry. Really great guy, and spoke to me about this. And he urges in this that we need F-16s, that our platform's great. We love these planes, but, to really have that upper edge on these systems, these Russian systems and the Russian invasion, we need a newer airframe. And he was, saying the F-16s. And I'll let you watch that if you're interested. But there has been many reports that Ukrainian pilots are, in the US training on NATO airframes, but it just hasn't been confirmed by anyone. And I know Ukraine have an opinion on the training, and America has a very different opinion on the training. The Ukrainian sources are saying, something like 6 months or a number of months, and they could have pilots training in these, where American sources are saying, no, it's more like a minimum 1.5 to 2 years. These are very complex aircraft. They are much more complex than the Soviet-era aircraft Ukraine are currently operating. Many more systems and fire control, all of this. Very different aircraft would take years to do it. And that was the excuse given in the beginning, was this war won't go long enough to have trained these guys. Now, I think there's a likely case that, some Ukrainian pilots did go into NATO countries to train on these in the beginning of the war, but that is just purely my speculation. But we know that if these guys haven't started training on these yet, then we're not going to see an aircraft delivered for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, even if they were training now. And if they had trained from the beginning, they still might be 6 months away from training on these. Because training on a fighter aircraft is not just take off, land. It's take off, fight, fire missiles, all of this. It's a very big thing. And going from one aircraft to another, from what I'm reading, it's not like going one car to another. These are completely different things. It's like going from your car you drive to then driving a Formula One. It's a very big thing. So the training in this will be a lot. And if they could, even if they say, yes, we'll send fighter jets and, pilots have not been trained, it could take years. There are people saying, well, could they potentially get contract civilian pilots that were flying for, the United States Air Force, say, that now work in the private sector and fly these jets? That'd be wild, but that could be absolutely something that could be done if the jets were there. But the F-16 does bring a whole new range of radars, weapons, things like that. And one of the most important would be the US HARM missile, the high-speed anti-radiation missile. Now, these are being used, but they would be used, more natively on an F-16, and these are basically to take out radars, giving then the option for Ukrainian to get some level of air superiority. That said, no side has air superiority, but you can't forget that Russia still has a massive military industrial complex of fighter jets and anti-air systems. That Russia's air force is still massive, and yes, they have lost a lot of stuff, but they're nowhere near losing all of it. They still have a massive reserve of that. We don't know what condition it's in, we don't know the level of training, but we know that there is a large backstock of this. But we also know that Russia did fail to get air superiority earlier in the war, and this is what experts thought that Russia would have almost instantly and would go into that combined arms, as I said before, and would be a massive turning point of this war in the beginning. But Russia has proven that they failed to get that level of air superiority. There's been Indian fighter pilots who operate the Su-30, which is a Russian fighter jet, so that without the AWACS, which is the airborne warning and control system, that an F-16 would basically be a sitting duck and could become cannon fodder. Now, what does AWACS do? And this is something I'm going to read because I'm not all over it. But AWACS provides situational awareness of friendly, neutral, and hostile activity, command and control of an area of responsibility, battle management of theatre forces, all altitude and all weather surveillance of the battle space, and the early warning of enemy actions during joint allied and coalition operations. Track enemy and friendly low-flying aircraft by eliminating ground clutter that confuses radar systems. So what we see is a lot of aircraft, Russian and Ukrainian, flying very low underneath that sort of radar thing, a very movie thing, but it exists. And this airborne AWACS system clears this up a lot. Now, we know that there are systems like this in use outside of Ukrainian airspace. And the range, of course, all this will be absolutely top secret. But from what there's things online saying the range is about 650 kilometres. So would there be an option of these sitting in the Black Sea international airspace or in Poland maybe and sending information in? The range is not open source on how far this can actually give you information back, but it is well known that there's been American AWACS and P-8 Poseidon aircraft sending information into Ukraine of locations, tracking missiles, tracking ships, things of this nature. And this is where we knew that the missile that landed in Poland was really confirmed that missile that landed in Poland and killed 2 people, that anti-air missile from Ukraine, was a Ukrainian missile. Although, and it annoys me a bit that Zelensky still has not deleted his post saying that it was a Russian attack. I agree that Russia is responsible for that missile ever being fired because, well, if there wasn't a Russian missile coming into Ukraine, well, it never would have been bloody fired. I agree with that premise, but it is also a very dangerous thing to still state that it is a Russian missile and not clear up that level of confusion. So will we see these jets come through? I don't know. I didn't think that we would see Abrams tanks come in either, and that has been confirmed, or Leopard tanks. Although Germany has only said in the past 11, 12 hours that no jets won't be sent to Ukraine. I don't know. I know jets operate so many systems inside them that we don't know exactly what would be being delivered. The F-16, when we talk F-16, we're talking the aircraft, but the systems inside of it, everything of that nature, all those countries and companies need to agree on how that is sent. So there would definitely be an export variant of this. Same with the M1A2 Abrams being delivered to Ukraine. They're getting the export variant. They're not getting the secret armour. Some of the systems inside may be different. I personally think it's unlikely that we will see jets this year. I think long term, I'm on the fence. I'm 50-50 if we will. Would it change things? Used correctly with combined arms could have a massive effect. Will we see them before their spring offensives that they're saying? Absolutely not. We'll be lucky to see the tanks before then. And things could change very rapidly. So, look, I hope that clears up some stuff. That's as much as I know about this. But I really appreciate your time and look after yourselves.